Hi, this video is a continuation of the article which you have been reading, and what we plan to do in this video is give you an example of how a VBE model is used to analyze any technology's business. And this same VBE model can be applied to AI, where you have companies pouring in billions of dollars of funds in AI investments, but they have not asked the basic question of what is the VBE model for AI to bring in revenues and scale. It has to be a model in which the investments can be sustained by a payback from the AI investments which companies are making. So let's watch two cases which have which will demonstrate why VB model analysis is required before you introduce a new technology and predict growth for that company. So let's start. So how VB models are used is what we are going to learn in this video and why they are important. And evaluation, we are going to take a actual use case, which is a evaluation of the 5G API VB model, which Ericsson has portrayed as a growth engine for Ericsson, and they have put a lot of links on their website also for that. So if you go to ericsson.com and you look at these, you will see the links there, what they talk about, how network API is going to evolve and what is going to happen. And similarly, I take another case of Nokia's push for 6G VB model. So we are going to evaluate these two companies' technology VB model. So this is what they say. Ericsson and Nokia are leading a role in establishment of a new venture which developers say will give access to advanced 5G network capabilities such as quality of service, enhanced security, and improved user authentication. I don't know what they mean with improved user authentication, but perhaps it's, perhaps the more details about a user, which phone he's using, and so on, or his uh, payment capability, and so on. And opening up networks is crucial to expanding digitalization and enabling new revenue streams for telecom industry. But will that happen to what they are saying is what we examine with the 5G API VB model. Network APIs, it seems, allow developers to easily access advanced 5G network capabilities, which they have given here. And McKinsey and company estimates that network APIs over several years, which reach around US 10 to 30 billion dollars in revenues, in addition to the US dollars 100 to 300 billion that can be unlocked in additional connectivity and edge computing revenues for network operators globally. Now, this is the pitch which these companies are investing on this model of 5G API. So this is, according to me, hype, because if we start looking at the VV model for 5G API, we'll see why this is a hype. And they have put in a lot of videos on their uh, websites giving different use cases and so on, and which is fine, which I think is will happen in due course, but they have not really analyzed the path to go there and how this revenue will be enabled. So that is what the VB model seeks to address. So let's look at 5G API VB model of Ericsson. Now, let's look at the key stakeholders. So the key stakeholders will be telecom equipment manufacturers like Ericsson and Nokia, who sell their equipment to the telecom operators. And basically, the revenue for all these companies, Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, comes from these telecom operators to whom they sell telecommunication equipment. Every 10 years, they change the generation of equipment, and they tell the telecom operators to replace the older generation of network equipment they have provided and replace it with the latest and newest 5G equipment or 6G equipment or 7G equipment. So it is planned out from 1G, it has gone on to till 5G we are here today. Now, where do the telecom operators get the revenue? They get it from the people using telecom services. And what Ericsson and Nokia are planning to do is having the developer community access to the 5G APIs. And the Google apps and Android and iOS ecosystem will be there for people who use their mobile phones for communication. And the app owners or the brand owners or retailers of products and services are the people who will finance the developer community to use the apps or develop the apps. Now, Ericsson and Nokia and the telecom operators have set up a platform where they will not sell it directly to the developer community, but they will use a 5G API reseller ecosystem. And it consists of four players. One is the hyperscalers, people like AWS, Google, Apple, and so on. And then you have the CPaaS companies. Uh, and you can see some of the companies here. And then you have the ISV companies. So IBM, Apple, Salesforce, Google, and so on will be there. And then you have the system integrator companies, the Capgeminis, Atos, Cognizant, and all these kind of companies, which will basically, so you cannot get the 5G APIs directly from either the telecom operators or from the telecom equipment manufacturers, but you can get it through the 5G API reseller ecosystem. Now, the developer community, what I have plotted here is I have plotted the money flow and the data flow. So let's look at how the money flow. So the money flow to these companies, the 5G API reseller ecosystem, is from the developers who basically buy their APIs from these four hyperscalers, CPaaS companies, ISV, and system integrators from the ecosystem. Now, this ecosystem will actually get the 5G APIs from this telecom operators, which looks to me more like a cartel because they would set the prices that this is the price you get the 5G APIs for, and we won't really negotiate with you on anything else. And today, this model is not there. Today, a developer or app brand owner can go directly to a telecom operator, do a deal with him, and basically get the best price possible, or through a company which goes and does a deal with individual telecom operators. But now they have built it as a kind of cartel, and finally, the app owners will actually finance the developer community to develop apps which will be used from these 5G API reseller ecosystem, for which the money flow will go into the telecom operators. And the app owners also perhaps could do deals directly with them, but that is generally not possible. You have to go through this 5G API reseller ecosystem. You can't do direct deals with the telecom operators. And the telecom operators in turn will finance part of the payment to the telecom equipment manufacturers who are part of the platform, which is Ericsson, Nokia, and perhaps they will include Huawei in the future. Now, where does this money going to come from? The money is obviously the apps are going to be used by people using telecom services, and they are going to use this apps which use 5G APIs, and money is going to flow through this apps ecosystem into the different players. Now, from the app ecosystem, it would go to brand owners. From here, they would basically, the other green arrows which are shown here will go here. Revenue will go here. And these app owners are going to finance the developer community to develop apps which use 5G APIs. Now, McKinsey estimates value of APIs will reach US dollar 10 to 30 billion, in addition to 100 to 300 billion that can be unlocked in additional connectivity. But I'm not clear about how they have anticipated this amount of flow happening. The challenge is all these the red circle which I show here, and who's going to pay. I'm sure this 110 to 30 billion which is going to come, developers embed network APIs in the apps which users use. That's the model. Now, it is going to come from this, and it's going to come from app owners or brand owners, retailers who actually finance the developers to have this, to develop this platform. And finally, when the apps are being used, the revenue is going to flow from the people using the apps into the apps ecosystem, and then it will go to all these telecom operators. The revenue flow will happen. Users use apps and use network APIs, which monetizes the telecom operators' revenues. That's the model. And the data flow is going to be between the app ecosystem and app owners, and between the users and the app ecosystem. So this is going to be the data flow, which is marked in black here. The telecom operators are going to get the revenues based on the number of API calls being made. Now, I find a big drawback in this market because users are not going to really use apps which charge them money for using the app. And unless that value is going to be really great and they are willing to pay that extra revenue, I believe this model will not work. So these are the breakpoints here. So the X, which is marked here, shows a breakpoint that are users really going to download apps which charge them money each time they use the app? I believe it is doubtful. And neither are the app owners going to have apps in which they will have to pay for, even if the app owners take over, that we'll take care of the payment to be made depending on a number of apps, and they have a monthly bill which the app owners send money to the telecom operators based on the number of times the APIs have been used by their customers, which are free. App owners, I don't think, are going to be willing to finance such kind of a model here. So these are the breakpoints. So as I have, the same diagram is shown here differently. So you have a global coverage across telecom operators globally through these people who are 5G API resellers and the developer community and the people. So the revenue is going to be based on the number of API calls being made for the telecom operators. And here in the green, I have marked the money flow, the data flow, and the value flow. And what I find here is basically the people are going to pay to the apps or ecosystem, and then the app owners are going to pay the developer community or directly to the 5G API reseller ecosystem, who are going to make money, and the money is going to be shared between the telecom equipment manufacturers, Ericsson, Nokia, and the telecom operators with this new company they have formed. Now, I find this is a problem because if you look at the value flow has to be there from the brand owners or app owners to the users. If they have that amount of value flow, then perhaps the money flow will also happen in a counterclockwise direction. And value enablers are basically the API calls. So basically, if they have enough value being enabled by this model, then revenue will flow. I find it very, and this value has to be enabled by the equipment manufacturers and telecom operators to these 5G API reseller ecosystem. And the 5G API reseller ecosystem should be able to sell it to the developer community who says, yeah, this is a fantastic thing, and the value will flow to the user. So I find it's not properly defined, nor is the value very visible in the whole ecosystem. And because of that, I feel this money flow is not going to happen at either of these 2 points. And I believe these are the breakpoints which will actually sync the model 5G API model which Ericsson has put up. Now we look at Nokia's 5G VBE model. Again, we examine it here. And this has a basis because in 2019, I had predicted that Ericsson and Nokia will have difficulty selling the 5G equipment by asking the telecom operators to replace all their 4G equipment with 5G equipment. And I'll explain why I said it here. And the same logic applies to Nokia's 6G VBE model. So here I have put a time scale here, and this starts from 1990 when the first 1G mobile phones were supplied, and the telecom equipment providers like Nokia and Ericsson started selling telecom operators the 1G equipment to host uh, mobile phones in their area. Now, this was followed by a 1G maintain kind of revenue model. So when they supplied to the whole country, and the revenue streams here on the y-axis, you find the revenues for telecom operators, and this could be in millions or billions or whatever, whichever country they supplied to, and they had a big revenue incoming when mobile areas were enabled by 1G equipment. And then after they had supplied, they started the maintenance phase. So they had something of a sinusoidal workflow, revenue flow. Once you supplied the equipment, you had good revenues, and then it dropped to only maintenance revenues. But then they came up with 2G, and they asked the telecom operators to replace all the 1G with 2G because 2G was a better model, it seems. And again, they followed the same pattern: 2G supply, 2G maintain; 3G supply, 3G maintain; 4G supply, 4G maintain; 5G supply, 5G maintain. And it will continue where, and in each 10 years, they will come with a different G and ask the telecom operators to replace their existing equipment with the new G. And why? Because each of these represents more capabilities for the telecom operators and perhaps more value add for the users. And this is the model which they have planned up to 7G. But let's look at the customer value here. So when they went from the 1G to 2G, the customer value was shown by what is this green triangle seen here. It was good value. And when they went from 2G to 3G replaced 2G, they had value, but it was a lesser diminished value. From 3G to 4G, again the customer value diminished further. And from 4G to 5G, there was not really much of customer value being added. And I'll explain in the next slide what happens. And they will have the same challenge for 6G and 7G. Now, operator value. So operator was telling the customers, you have digital to analog, voice and security was there when they changed from 1G to 2G. So your mobile calls didn't drop off, and there was security, there was SMS, you could send SMSs with 2G and so on. When you came from 2G to 3G, you had better data speeds and web browsing. So that was something which the customers liked, and that is shown by triangle here, this triangle here. So with each transition from 1G to 2G, the value for customers started becoming less and less. From 3G to 4G, your data speeds increased, and then you had video calling, and you could have group calls and so on. But when you came to 5G again, there was not much change in the value which 4G offered or 5G offered over 4G, except the operators and the telecom equipment manufacturers like Ericsson and Nokia said that you have IoT and data speed is increased, but the customers really didn't care if their video came 20 milliseconds faster. They were not willing to pay extra rate to the mobile operators. And that same challenge will happen for 5G to 6G transition, where they have not worked on the value model to enable more value for users to switch from 5G to 6G, and same with 7G. Now, here I am giving two things on why 5G sales did not happen. So I had put an article on LinkedIn. If you click on this QR code here, you will be able to view that article. And similarly, I had written another article on the failed Vonage investment. So the reality was these two things. So I had predicted 5G sales not to be happening in 2019, and 4 years after that, or 5 years after that, Ericsson and Nokia had difficulty in selling 5G equipment. So this is why 5G sales did not happen. And I was pretty surprised that I could predict it using a VBE model, but Ericsson and Nokia could not really predict it, and they had to lay off 1,200 people in 2024. And the second article here is on the failed Vonage investments. Because Ericsson did not really look at their investments in 5G APIs, they invested 6.2 billion dollars in a company called Vonage, and that company investment had to be written off by 4.1 billion. And today in 2024, from 2022, it was bought for 6.2 billion, and in 2024 the value of that company was 2.1 billion after 4.1 billion of investment was written off. So that was the reality. Now let's look at the revenue of Ericsson and Nokia from 1996 to 2024. I've put estimated because I downloaded it earlier. And it was what you see here is, if you look at the VB model, you see that in 1996 they were growing, but in 2000 they had a drop in their revenues and so on. And then in 2009 again there was a drop in revenue when 4G was introduced. And when 5G is introduced, again there was a drop in revenue, which means that transition has not been really without any hiccups. Now I'm going to draw you to another graph here. This is the Apple revenue from 1996 to 2024. And Apple was on the verge of bankruptcy in 1999 when Steve Jobs had returned. And why I'm giving this is to evaluate the VBE model, why VBE model happened. So the iPod was introduced in 2001 when Apple had a very bad year. In 2001, the revenues were dropping. But once they introduced the Apple with a VBE model, you see the Apple revenue has never come down up to 2016. So the iPhone was introduced in 2007 here in this, and then the revenues for Apple really shot up, going 71%, 67%, and so on. It went on until 2016 when they had a short drop in revenue, after which again it has climbed. But now you see Apple revenues tapering off because they would need to innovate their VBE model. And here I'm comparing on the left hand side, I'm comparing Ericsson and Nokia revenues from 1996 to 2024, and Apple and Nvidia revenues from 1996 to 2024 for Apple, and Nvidia from 1999 to 2024. What you see here is when the VBE model changed. For Apple, it changed with the iPod and iPhone. They changed the VBE model, and the revenue has been growing continuously. For Nvidia, it changed around 2015-16, and after which Nvidia revenues have kept growing up. Whereas if you look at Nokia and Ericsson revenues, they have really not changed. They have been more or less stable across the years. They have not really grown, which means their VBE model is definitely something which is at risk. And if they don't innovate on their VBE model, it will be a revenue drop for these companies. So, coming back, when Nokia and Ericsson say that we are going to have a new venture that will give developers easy access to 5G network API capabilities, it's more a hype than a reality. And I've shown these two figures here, empty cloud VBE model, which will not bring in revenues, which are projected without addressing the value in the ecosystem, and a VBE model which brings in revenues is shown by a rain cloud, which addresses the value in the ecosystem. So basically, it's something which comes with water and it rains, and a empty VBE model is something which really doesn't bring any value to the ecosystem. So with this, I've uh, go on reading, and that is what I've given here. As a addendum, as a final moral story, I want to really highlight the point that AI companies have invested heavily in the AI ecosystem without giving a view to how the VB model will span out for a AI ecosystem to work. And even if Microsoft has deep pockets today, investing heavily in AI without having any returns come back won't really, I mean, it's only a matter of time before their pockets will run out of cash. Thank you.